Chapter 1.5 L'incendio. Coppola sat in the reading room, which had a grand fireplace made of stone, embroidered with chiseled vines, and a candelabra on top of it. The sunlight shone through the windows and onto the red satin chair that Coppola was sitting on. To avoid the dreadful light and to read his newspaper, he ruffled it and moved from the light. In the newspaper, there were mysterious murders occurring in Catania. The killer has not been found. As Coppola read, he began to speak. "What are we waiting for?" he said. "Let's slay the beast. We don't know if it's one of them," he thought. "It's probable that it's just a loony." "It's better to be certain," he replied. "If you're right, then we'll bring him to the authorities. But if you're wrong," Coppola grinned viciously, "then we are all in agreement. We will go to Catania." "If I may ask, my son," Eduardo said confusedly, "where exactly are you going?" "I'm going out for a hunt," he explained, "near Etna." "Oh, that's wonderful," Eduardo said with glee. "And what exactly will you be hunting?" "If all goes well, there will be enough rabbits to fill a stew pot," Coppola boasted. "Of course, I won't be eating that pestilent meat." "May I go with you?" Eduardo asked politely. "I much rather need some time alone, father," he replied. "Away from all the life of the city and nobility, you understand? Yes?" His father nodded. "Indeed, it's good for your health." Coppola went down into the cellar and opened a secret wall using a lever, which was usually reserved for expensive wines. Within the opening was a shining axe, a large glass jar of bullets, and a flintlock, gold-plated and wood-painted black. As he brought them to his carriage, he returned and had Marco pack his clothing, including his red coat with a thick, ruddy leather interior. Marco also brought to him a red feather hat. "I assure this hunt will go well, young master?" he asked him sweetly. "It will be simply excellent. Did Austu also bring the rifles?" "All was prepared. We hope your trip is memorable." "Thank you, Marco," Coppola sighed with gratitude. "You're a good man." Coppola set off. However, instead of hunting in Etna, he diverted the course into the city of Catania. They were going to stay there for the night anyway, as the trip from Palermo to Etna is nearly a 2-day journey. After days of traveling, they had finally reached Catania, and just at sunset. They reached an inn on the outskirts of the city, which was called Il Dormitorio. At last, he and the coachman could rest after a long journey, and tomorrow they would travel to Etna, where he would hunt. However, for Coppola, the hunt began that night. He loaded his weapons and clothing into a sack, and in the middle of night, leapt out the window onto the roof of the inn. His blonde hair, now free, blew in the spring evening wind. He slid down the roof onto the ground and prepared himself. He changed out of his clothing and into his proper attire. His leather coat could resist even the sharpest of fangs, and his silver axe would make any creature of evil flinch in despair. As he left, he grabbed a lantern from the outside of the inn. As he did normally for a hunt of this caliber, he would walk the streets with lantern and axe in his hands and his flintlock in his coat. If anyone dared touch him, they would see their end. It was near midnight. No one wise was out at this time. Thankfully, the majority of the beasts he hunted were the most foolish of all. He walked in the shadows of his lantern as he waited for a sound to utter in the quiet city, for now all he could hear was wind. Perhaps there was he began to think, when he heard a shout. That's when he knew. He quickly sourced the sound and drifted there in the shadows. When he approached where he believed he heard the sound, he could hear the sound of heavy breathing, and in the midst of lantern light surrounding the homes, Coppola saw it. It was a dreadful, decrepit, and demonic creature. It looked like a human, but it was constantly foaming with saliva and blood. In the dim light, Coppola could see it had no hair, and its skin was pale and almost gray. Below it, laid a young man, probably around Coppola's age. Once he knew the beast, Coppola began to breathe heavily, almost in response to the beast's breathing. It did not notice him, but it soon would. As the beast began to fade into the shadows, looking for more prey, Coppola's axe laid over his shoulder, splitting his bone in two. The creature yelled in pain, but as it pulled out the axe, the silver began to burn its fingers and hands, causing more pain. The creature screamed louder, but no one dared exit their homes. The beast leapt at Coppola, its rearing fangs poking out of its mouth. They were both on the ground, but as the beast went to bite Coppola, his eyes were black, and the beast became afraid. For it was not that it was the beast, but the hunter had become the true beast. Coppola kicked the creature off him and put it to a brick wall. "What are you?" Coppola asked to it, grinning viciously. "Sick," it shouted in raspy and groaning voice. "Nice to meet you," Coppola grinned and pulled out his pistol, shooting 2 shots, one piercing into the brick wall in front of him, and the other hitting the side of the vampire. The shots rang out across the city. However, the vampire was quick and ran off into the darkness. Coppola breathed heavily and began to laugh without control. "I was right," he shouted over and over. "You doubted me." Still, no one exited their homes. Coppola assumed it was because of the danger. The mayor ordered all to stay inside, no matter what. In the quiet night, he could hear crying. He looked down to the young man that was dead, bleeding on the floor. It seems his family already knew what happened to their son, their brother. He bowed to the corpse, reached into his pocket, and dropped a bullet to him, causing a drip in the pool of blood on the brick path. Despite the creature getting away, Coppola's hunt was far from over. The creature had left a visible trail of blood from his wounds. All Coppola needed to do was lower his lantern, which he had previously set down to flay the beast, and follow the blood in the lantern light. Despite knowing the beast would never bother him again, he kept himself alert, still pulsating with the lust for blood as his breathing remained stiff. The trail led him to a large building. Unlike the other surrounding buildings made of brick or stone, this was solid wood. Bloodstains drenched the wooden staircase leading to the 2 doors, which had a slot to place a bar in it, but it was torn off and appeared to have been thrown on the ground next to the building. Above the doors were 2 large windows, creating a T shape. Slowly, Coppola opened the door, and a loud creak uttered from it. He slowly stepped, holding his lantern out. He turned to his right to see what was in the building. They were books. "Is this a library?" Coppola thought. He continued to walk forward. He pointed his lantern up and noticed there was a 2nd floor. On the railing, there were small patches of blood. He heard breathing. He turned around. The vampire was perched on the railing, and the moonlight from the window gave the creature a foreboding appearance. The creature snarled and leapt in the air to attack Coppola, attempting to bite him and mangle his veins. But Coppola had already drawn his pistol and shot the monstrosity in the neck. It fell, and it groaned and screamed in pain. "It burns!" it cried out. "It burns!" "It burns?" Coppola grinned, and the lantern light showed his mischievous face. What a good idea! While the vampire continued to groan and scream on the floor, Coppola went outside and went to the corner of the building. There, he dropped his lantern down with ferocity, and it shattered it to pieces. Suddenly, the small kindle from the lantern grew as it attached itself to its newfound fuel source, the library. Within minutes, the library grew to a blaze, as the books provided an excellent fuel source. As it grew to a massive flame, he could hear the screams of his victim, the vampire. The glass windows expanded and exploded out. The flames encompassed his weak and frail body, as he was slowly turned to ash. All Coppola could do was laugh. He laughed with such intensity. It was as if a demon had taken over him. He walked away, and as he did, the building collapsed, leaving a pile of burning tinder. He continued to stride with such pride, such victory in his act and effort. When he returned to the inn, it was nearly dawn. When he got there, he knocked on the door. The coachman was confused, but assumed he had done a morning walk before their departure. Coppola slept in the carriage while they traveled to Etna, although he got little sleep due to the terrain of the mountains. It was a very successful hunt indeed.